spiritual direction really is about, for me as a director, asking good questions. It's not in any way designed for me to be Mr. Answer Man and to have all of the right answers and to point people in the right direction. It's more of a tour guide sort of circumstance and helping lead people, but ultimately they need to go there, to their destination.
Welcome to the Grounded Presence Podcast, a place for exploring authentic identity, deep community, and an ever-evolving spiritual journey. I'm your host, Daniel Powell, and today's episode is the second installment of the short series that I'm doing on work. I've titled this series, The Work That Is Yours, where I've sat down with a number of people doing really interesting work in the world, work that they are just deeply and unmistakably internally wired to do. And through their work and their unique path, striving to make the world a more complete place through what they have to bring to it. On episode 14 here, I have the pleasure of talking with Trevor Wright, an absolutely awesome guy who pastors a church out in Ohio. And though he's a pastor, more recently he started down this path of learning the practice of spiritual direction, which is just awesome. It's a practice of drawing others out in a one-on-one setting and making space for them to listen to that which is deepest within themselves. And whatever you call that deepest, truest part that exists in all of us, call it soul, call it spirit, the heart, that still small voice, God, when you enter into that, it's a holy space. And I want to talk to anybody who dares to dive to those depths. So I guarantee you're absolutely going to love this guy, Trevor. And with that, let's get right on into the conversation.
Good morning.
Hey, Trevor. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing good. So just tell me a little bit about yourself and where you're at right now.
I am in lovely Northwest Ohio, which is not exciting in any way. I have been in ministry for about 20 years or so, and just at the point of about to be certified for spiritual direction. So I'm kind of shifting a little bit in the focus and the way that I work with people and help them in their spiritual growth.
Cool. And when you say in ministry, is that 20 years as a pastor?
I started out with youth ministry and shifted from youth ministry to planting a new church. We shifted from planting a new church to merging it with an existing church, and now I pastor that merged church. And so I've kind of shifted, put on a different hat every handful of years, and it's been an unexpected adventure, I guess I should say.
Has that been fun or kind of necessary for your journey, or do you feel like you might have rather had one thing and stayed with it?
I think that it really works well to transition, not to get stale, not to stay in the same place and do the same thing year after year. I never really wanted to be a pastor, which is kind of a funny way. I talk about how I backed my way into being a pastor, really. When we were in youth ministry, my wife and I, we just noticed that people were leaving the church when they went to college, and tried to make sense of what does that mean? What does that look like? What does church look like for people who are leaving the church? Why, really getting to the root causes of why people were leaving the church at the time. Ultimately, we ended up starting a church for people who don't like church, people who have been hurt by the church or left the church for whatever reason. So that's how we ended up starting a church called Journey, which is all about the journey of faith. And then after a couple of years, we merged that with an existing church, which was kind of a exercise in frustration, but also it was mutually beneficial for sustainability. So it's morphed into this thing. I've appreciated the transitions and the changes and, a different focus here and there. I'm always trying to figure out where is the capital C church, where is it going next? What is happening? Trying to stay ahead of the curve, which is kind of hard to do. But that's been my hope all along.
Well, it sounds like you're having a really cool response to the current climate of things, at least. Well, yeah, I'm really interested to talk about the spiritual direction, but man, I want to hear more about this church that you've started, because that just sounds like a really cool endeavor, starting a church that's for people who have been hurt by the church. And what does that look like?
It's messy and it's hard and it's frustrating.
So
in a lot
it's
of ways.
normal church?
I think there are certainly some semblances of that. Yeah. So, I just, there are so many just, how should I say this? The way that churches operate has been, I think, accepted and allowed to function in the way that it always has. And when people walk away from the church, people within the church, those who are still there, chalk it up as not their problem, but the person who left, which is really it's created this storm of people who have kind of thrown their hands in the air, thinking that there must not be more, or that their expression of God and the church is not a viable, acceptable sort of thing, and has really kind of given the church a bad name in a lot of ways. So we just kind of went about this process of trying to figure out, what does it look like to embrace those who have thought, that's it, I'm out, I'm gone. What does the environment look like for those who are willing to dangle their toes off the edge of the pool one more time? What does that look like for those who are don't want to give up on God, but have given up on the church? What does that look like? And so we just, I don't know, we're muddling along, and we roll up our pant sleeves, our pant legs, and just wade in a little bit deeper with those who are hurt. We've got people who are have walked away from the church and have come back. We've got people who are, we're their last stop on the way out of town, so to speak. People who have been escorted out of other churches, people who have had really bad experiences with the church. And so you got to tread lightly. You got to wear soft gloves in dealing with those who are vulnerable. Yeah, I mean, it's tough, but I love it. So.
I mean, you say it's messy and it's complicated, and I'm thinking that even as an institution, trying to do all this good, you're inevitably going to hurt people, and you kind of have to deal with that instead of turning a blind eye when you're in the position that you're in. Would you say that's true at all?
Can you say that another way? I think I know what you're saying.
Yeah. So just
you're not asking.
By the nature of being an institution, you hurt people when you're in a one-on-one relationship with them, Right. But just by the nature of being an institution and the institution of the church, people will get hurt, regardless of how much you try to do to avoid that. And I'm thinking, I'm curious, I guess, if part of the messiness that you're talking about is people getting hurt and kind of inviting that mess into the institution instead of sweeping it under the rug and, like you said earlier, saying it's not my problem. Right.
Yeah, inviting it into our church, it creates some interesting circumstances for sure. We've got people who have been in the church all their life, and people who literally were their first church, and that creates some interesting dynamics. And I'll tell you what, I always side with those who are hurt, and those who are new, and those who are young in faith, and those who are dealing with the most baggage, which I think is really what you see when you look more deeply into the Gospels and what Jesus was doing. The conflicts with him were always with the most established of the religious, and he always sided with the marginalized. He was always connecting with those who had been hurt. Those who were considered out, he was bringing in, and those who assumed that they would always be in, always had been in, were the ones who actually ended up on the outside. And that's what I want to do. That's what I want our church to do. That's what I want people to come around to, that those who are marginalized on the outside, those are the ones that Jesus loved. Those are the ones that he spent time with. Those are the ones that he went out of his way to connect with the most, to lovingly bring them in when it had been really reinforced that they weren't supposed to be in, according to the establishment.
So what's prompted you towards this change and getting into spiritual direction?
I think as it relates to spiritual direction, I had said earlier that I try and stay ahead of the curve of kind of how things are transitioning. Spiritual direction is actually ancient practice. Kind of got lost, I think, for a long time. Probably still maintains some presence within the Catholic Church, and is becoming more prevalent outside of the Catholic Church today. I think that it's a far more effective way of helping people to grow. It's slower, which is contrary to what an established church wants to do, right? The established church wants to crank out disciples in this 1, 2, 3, 4 step process, spit them out on the other side as this manufactured sort of thing. And the more you can do and the faster you can do that, the more effective you are as a church and your numbers look good and all that kind of thing, right? But I think that spiritual direction, as far as actually creating those who are followers of Jesus, or even not, spiritual direction is not necessarily specific to Christian, but that is my context, so I should probably say that. But for those who really want to go deeper and further in faith, it's not necessarily a group thing. It's not a mass-produced thing. It's slower. It's more like the crock pot than the microwave, you know. And so I'm realizing that that's probably a more effective way to truly help people grow, so that they can help other people grow. And it just seems like that's a better way to go about it. But it also grapples with kind of where my heart is with people in stages of faith, and so that's what's causing this transition. I get a little frustrated with institutional sorts of things, and so this is not necessarily an institutional way to help people grow.
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, we grasp for models so often,
Right.
Just, I think as humans and definitely in our society, we just grasp for models, and it sounds like spiritual direction is more of a posture towards a person rather than a model of how to get it done.
Absolutely. Posture is a perfect word. I have to regularly remind myself the posture that I need to hold within the spiritual direction process of walking with someone. That it's not it's not transactional. It's not manipulative. It really is a posture of humility and journeying together. It's companioning other people, and it honestly, it's a delight, but it's also a privilege to be able to do that with people.
Cool. So you're currently in a training program for becoming a spiritual director.
Correct. Yeah. I've got just a handful of months left before my certification completes. So yeah, I'm in the process of completing my education for my certification for spiritual direction. I got a handful of months left before that. So I'm not full-blown spiritual director just yet. Looking forward to being able to do that. So over the last year and a half, coming up on 2 years, I've just been walking with some individuals. I let them know that I might mess up, but I won't mess you up in the process. And just companioning people now, trying to get some experience and some trust level built up there.
So a little bit of practice before you get thrown into the deep end, huh?
Basically, yeah. Guinea pig process, right? So that people can understand what it is that I'm trying to do, but I have a better skill set for being able to walk with people. There's such variety of individuals. It's not a cookie cutter sort of thing. So as people are growing, they come with different experiences, different background. They're maybe in different stages of faith and what it is they need at any given time. There's a lot of variables there. So it's helpful for me to walk with a variety of people in this practice time frame, so that I can learn to work with people who are at different phases, different stages.
So. First, tell me a little bit about what you've learned through this process. You said it's a 2-year program?
Right.
So tell me a little bit about this process and just what you've learned over the past, year and a half, almost 2 years.
Good question.
Or just what's spoken to? I mean, what's been eye-opening? It doesn't have to be like the unified theory of spiritual direction or anything. Just, what's blown you away?
Yeah. I think something that we've delved into quite a bit that has begun to inform the way that I experience God, but also to better understand the way that other people experience God. Something called the Enneagram, which is kind of resurged. Again, this is an ancient thing that is coming back around. If something stands the test of time, it's probably worth looking into, right? So I like to read some of the old stuff, and I like to explore some of the old stuff. But in our training, we've delved into the Enneagram, which is a 9-type system, but kind of a personality sort of system. People do the Myers-Briggs, or they do I'm trying to think of what all the names of those various personality things. But this has a rootedness in the ancient Christian faith, and informs the way that people interact with one another and with God. And everybody has a unique starting point and a unique personality, and where you tend to move when you are in health and where you tend to move when you are in stress kind of changes the game, right? And so as you learn about where you are currently, it helps you realize whether or not your trajectory is moving toward God or away from God, whether it's moving toward people or away from people. Helps you realize whether you're in health or not. And when we're not in health, obviously, we tend to move away from God and we tend to hurt people. How can we fix that? How can we move forward with that? And so understanding for myself who I am according to this Enneagram, but also then kind of being able to see some of the markers along the way, to be able to see how people are expressing their faith experience and expressing their interactions with others, helps to inform me, where are they, who are they, what's perhaps their motivation in the way that they're moving through life. And that can help shake up some of the stuckness that people experience in their faith journey, if that makes sense. Yeah. So Enneagram has been phenomenal.
So since we're talking Enneagram, what's your number?
I'm a 5. Are you familiar?
I am.
Okay.
I'm a 4. Hardcore 4.
Okay. All right. I'm a 5 with a 4 wing. I do have that creative side to me, but very analytical observer, analyzing the data, crunching the numbers, figuring out stuff before I make decisions. That's kind of the nutshell of who I am. So of all of the Enneatypes and the individuals who get into Enneagram, 5s want to memorize every single bit, so that we can figure out who's what and anticipate how they're going to interact with us, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I'll just share a little tidbit from my life lately. You're talking about interacting with God and how you interact with God and how you interact with people. But one of the things that's been so special to me this past year, I told you a little bit about where I'm at before we started having this conversation, but just sitting in nature alone and just kind of like being a part of it. Like a lot of people really enjoy sitting in nature and like feeling close to God. And what I've found is that sitting in nature, I kind of feel the absence of God, and kind of like, or maybe at least the absence of what I've been told God is.
Oh, okay.
And like through that, so I would just say like there's no God, right? But in a way, in like some mystical way, like through that, I feel like I can say I'm close to God, like in the absence of God. So anyways.
Right. Yeah. Which is interesting, because I've had conversations with individuals within spiritual direction that you reach a certain point, I think, in life and in faith stages where there's a lot of unlearning that needs to be done, or unpacking of what we have put in this suitcase that we're carrying through life. A lot of that related to God, Most of that, I think, is really informed by others rather than experience. Especially if somebody has grown up in the church, there's so much of a focus on information gathering. Here are the things you need to know. Here are the things that you need to in order to be a good Christian. Here are the things that you have to do and say and know. that's not always true. Like Sunday school teacher may have the best of intentions, but it may not be lived experience for someone. And so you carry that suitcase around for 30 years, and suddenly you have this crisis of faith, and what's in that suitcase is completely not helpful for where you are in your faith experience. And so there's a lot of unlearning, unpacking that needs to be done, I think, to move forward and to progress and make it as you move forward in faith stages. So,
yeah, definitely. I agree with you there. I'm in that stage for sure. No, I mean, on that note, that's something that I've been thinking about lately as well, is just kind of the progression of faith and how it's handed down. I've really been ruminating on this idea of, what came first, the experience of God or the explanation of God, in your life. And it seems like the people that, I'm not sure exactly how to phrase it, but just those people that you're around, like in the church, and you just get good vibes, It's like, you just know they're all about love. It's like, seems like for those people, the experience of God came first, and then like the language, through the religion came later. I've just kind of been like mapping this out, and it's like, I think most people get into the church because they have a strong experience. But I think like over time that connection can get weakened, and like it gets replaced with dogma, like as a placeholder for the experience. And then the next generation's just handed dogma. And then when the next generation rejects the dogma because they lack that spiritual experience, the prior generation takes it as a rejection of their experience. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And then it just creates like all this mess. So anyways.
Yeah, I can buy that. Absolutely. I mean, it's supposed to be about experience, right? It's supposed to be about connection with God, rather than right answers and right actions necessarily. I mean, there's people who go through all of the right steps, do all of the right, and the word right being in quotes there, right? Supposedly right things, right actions, right, check off the list. And, further down the road are messed up as a result of it, because that wasn't actually experience, and it wasn't relational. It was transactional and box checking.
So tell me a little bit more about how you find yourself at this juncture of pastor and spiritual director.
I think they pair nicely. I've never really felt comfortable. As I said, I backed my way into being a pastor, and counseling has not always been my capacity. I got good friends who are therapists, and if there's something that needs attention in that way, I'll refer. But when it really comes down to the core of caring for someone's spirit, spiritual direction is a great asset to me as a pastor, to be able to care for someone in a little more informed way. Before I probably did some level of direction, but there was nothing informing that process. So I just kind of go with whatever seemed good at the time, right?
Yeah.
So spiritual direction helps me, I think, now, in a formal setting, but also in an informal setting. Spiritual direction really is about, for me as a director, asking good questions. It's not in any way designed for me to be Mr. Answer Man and to have all of the right answers and to point people in the right direction. It's more of a tour guide sort of circumstance, and helping lead people, but ultimately they need to go there, to their destination. So it's helpful for me in that it reframes the way that I think, the way that I have just normal conversations over coffee with people. I might actually be pulling stuff out of my spiritual direction bag in a conversation. We're not actually doing a session, but it helps me better walk with people, I guess.
And I would imagine as a 5, Enneagram 5, that's like pretty valuable and probably a pretty personally expanding experience for you as well.
Yes, it's also challenging for me as a 5 because, I mean, a 5 can gather information all day. I've got a friend who said a good way to explain 5s would be ready, aim, 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 aim. Eventually we'll fire. you know? So I kind of have to hold carefully that posture, like I had mentioned before. But as a 5, I gather, I listen. At some point, though, I've got to help move forward, and so I'm aware of that. I'm growing in that. Just a unique part of my personality makeup,
On that note, let me ask you a little fun question. How long does it take you to make an Amazon purchase?
Oh, no, I can buy with the best of them.
Oh, can you? Okay. See,
absolutely.
It takes me forever. I'll spend like 2 days, 3 days thinking about it. I'll wear myself out. And then I'm just like, dude, just click it. Just
at some point,
you got 3 options, just pull the trigger. Because, for me, it's like that Amazon purchase could actualize me as a 4. So
it could.
Got to choose carefully.
And you don't want to buy the same thing everybody else has either, right?
That's right. You want to have that special item.
Yes.
So how have you found that being a pastor and a spiritual director is similar, and how are they different?
I think they're different in the way that I think a lot of times people just look to the church and look to the pastor to have the answer. Well, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to believe. You tell me, whether that's in a sermon on a Sunday morning, if it's in a Bible study or a small group, if it's somebody comes into my office with this predicament. You tell me. You tell me what to do. I don't know what to think. You tell me. And that, I think there's a lot of that because of the way that the church as an institution is. Like, I just need the right thing to say or do right now. I just need this thing. You just tell me. Which is actually interesting. I was just reading, I won't be able to tell you what the reference is. I was just reading in Scripture the other day. It's a story where the rich ruler comes to Jesus and says, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus says, well, here are the commandments to follow. And he's like, yeah, I do that, but what else do I do? And the question just struck me. He's like, what do I do? What is this thing? What is the magic ticket? What do I do? And so the response in that story, Jesus is like, well, you got to sell everything, give it to the poor, and come follow me. But I guarantee if there are 3 people who came and asked that same question of him, he's going to give a different answer. It's not, the magic ticket is not sell everything, give to the poor, and come follow me. But for that person, it was, right? Because it got to the heart, not to the action. Like, what do I do? You need to change your heart is really what Jesus was saying there, right? But anyway, so that question comes to me like, what do I do, Trevor? What do I do in this circumstance? That's the pastor hat. The spiritual director hat is, I don't know, what do you feel like God is asking you to do at this point? Oh, that's not what I asked. Well, but that's how I'm going to answer, right? That's how I'm going to answer. Like, what is the leaning that you're feeling right now? Let's dig into that sort of circumstance. What has been your experience when faced with a similar sort of situation? Let's look at the markers along the way with those past experiences. How has your growth now currently shaped the way that you might move forward differently? It's just a different animal. Not everybody's there. Not everybody wants to deal with that. They'll be like, oh, I'm a go talk to somebody who tell me the answer. Well, that's not spiritual direction.
That's what we all want, but it's like, I've seen a few therapists in my day, and it's like, the ones that tell you what to do and they like tell you you're okay, like that those aren't the ones you want to talk to,
Right.
The ones you want to talk to are the ones that are like, what do you think about it? And then you have to talk about it, and then you have to do all the heavy lifting. It's really uncomfortable.
Exactly. Absolutely. And not everybody's there,
Yeah.
Not everybody is at that point, which, we've kind of been skirting around this book, the Critical Journey. It talks about, interestingly, the stages of faith, and that most churches are really set up for the early stages of faith. Churches are not built or created in a capacity for those who are actually moving to later stages of faith. They're not equipped for it. And so there's the rub that, people who are in the early stages of faith want the answer. They don't want the exploration, I guess.
The pastor works really good for those first 3 stages. like in
Absolutely.
that critical journey model. And then the spiritual director works really good for the last 3 stages. So I actually had a printout after you mentioned that. And man, I just found this little like spreadsheet of it, right? Of like the bullet points of the journey. And you mentioned this book to me like when we had talked a week or so ago. And I just saw this. I'm like, why didn't anybody tell me about this book sooner? Like, this makes so much sense.
Right. Yeah, I don't know how many people that I've recommended this book to. I wish I had it 20 years ago. I wish that I had this understanding. It put some words to things that I kind of felt or knew in my gut, but couldn't express, and so that's been real helpful. So yeah, the Critical Journey by Janet Hagberg and Robert Gulick. I don't know if that's how you say it or not, but about these stages of faith and 6 stages of faith, it makes so much sense. So should I just kind of give an overview now for those who are completely unfamiliar? And
let me make a quick aside before we get into this.
Sure,
so this just stitched so much together for me just looking at this 1-page spreadsheet. How crazy that is, right? Because what I've been saying for the last probably year or two is like, why aren't there elders in the church? It just seems like there's so much immaturity. And it's like, I wish there were these like embedded elders in the church who just kind of understood the full journey, right? Yeah. So that when somebody starts like deconstructing their faith and they're like, this model of God doesn't work for me, instead of it being this thing where, that person gets ostracized and like ejected from the church, it becomes this thing of the elder kind of, steps up to their side and says, hey, I get it. Let's go talk, like everybody else isn't ready for this yet. Like they're not quite there. So they're not going to understand it and it's going to offend them. But you and me, we're going to go good places because you're on the right path, It's like, I wish those were there. So anyways, seeing this model is just like, okay, that's actually like a thing. Like that's actually traditionally like embedded in how, the journey of a faith journey should go. So, I have a printout of these stages, but if you know them well by heart, I'll just let you go for them.
Well, I don't know them well by heart, but this is certainly something that I'm kind of living into. And boy, I'll probably read this book every year for forever. So it just talks about the 6 stages of faith, and that the first one probably pretty obvious, but that recognition of God, of some people might call that the conversion experience. It's like you were talking about earlier, that experience of God, right? You have this kind of this entry experience with God. It's exciting, it's passionate, it's new, and boy, you just like don't get in the way of somebody who has just had this recognition of God, right? Super exciting. It's inspiring to those who have perhaps lost their way, and they look and they see somebody who's at that stage, and it maybe rejuvenates them. Like, all right, that's the reason that we exist, right? That's the recognition of God. That's stage 1. And stage 2 then is this discipleship process, which I feel in a lot of ways is broken within the church, because rather than discipleship, what we try and do, we in quotes, or the church in quotes, they go through a cloning process instead of a discipleship process. What I mean by that is,
that word discipleship has always just sent cringes up my spine, because to me, discipleship has always just felt like somebody's discipling you, like to get another notch in their belt.
Right.
Like that's what it's meant to me,
Or to be a disciple like them as opposed to a follower of Jesus, right?
Yeah.
So we're cloning based upon what we think, and oh my gosh, there's so many parallels when you look at this and you look at the Gospels and what the religious institution was at the time, and how much of a hard time they had with Jesus because he didn't fit their version of what a disciple would be, right? He didn't fit their definition or their picture of what a religious leader or rabbi should be. He was outside of that. So there's this life of discipleship, this stage 2, you're learning, you're growing, you're digging in. Here are the things that you need to know in order to be able to move forward, right? That's kind of where they're at, but we don't do it well in the church necessarily. We're not necessarily modeling this, you should be like Jesus, Instead, we're really subconsciously saying you should be like me and all of the others who's been spit out of this discipleship process that we do.
It's that well-intentioned stage, like I'm sure you know well as a past youth pastor, how far is too far? You know, like you want to be good, but you want to live and have fun too. Like
Yep. So you go recognition of God. Stage 2 is that discipleship. Stage 3 is the productive life, which is now I know enough, now I can do enough, and just really getting in. So, people jump into leading a ministry or leading a small group or Bible study, or they serve on this group or that group. It's that productive life, and you're doing. It's the doing, right? So you recognize this experience with God, you learn enough, now you can do enough in stage 3. Most churches are really built for those 3 stages. You produce, you do, hopefully you do enough that you get other people who would come into stage 1 and progress to stage 3. That's kind of the progression. That's where churches are set up. That's kind of the direction that people go. They think like, well, that's it. There's no more. You do so that more people would come to that recognition of God in stage 1. But that's not it. There's 6 stages. There's not 3 stages. And so that's kind of where the disconnect and the rub is. And what really is intriguing for me is stage 4. And stage 4 is why we started Journey in the first place. That's why we planted a church for people who were jumping ship from the church. Because what happens at stage 4 is there's this crisis of faith. There's this feeling that there's got to be something more than what has been presented. Like there's got to be, and so it's referred to as the journey inward. But the sense that there should be more to this. The lack of fulfillment, this unsettled bit, a life circumstance happens, and as I had alluded before, like all of the things that are in your suitcase for this journey that you've got, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, none of that helps you with this crisis of faith. None of that helps you with making sense out of, a particular life circumstance. This is a lot of times, I think, when you start to hear people say, why does bad stuff happen to good people? I don't understand why this is happening to me. Why is God letting me down in this? Why is, there's a lot of why questions in stage 4. Why this? Why that? This defines the answers that I was always given in stage 2. This defies the actions that I've been living to in stage 3. What do I do now? So you end up with that crisis of faith in stage 4, and there's a couple of responses to that. So natural is the people who are in stage 3 grab them by the shirt collar and pull them back. Like, no, you can't go there. You stay back here with us. It feels like you're backsliding. You're questioning God. You can't do that. You get back here. You're in uncharted territory. That's not what we do. And so the person in that stage 4 goes, you know what? That sounds right. There must not be more. And they just sit in this cycle of stage 1, 2, 3. There must not be more. The other reaction is, you know what? No, I don't believe you when you say, get back here. That's not right. I just don't think that this church thing will answer these questions. And so they actually disengage and step out of these 6 stages of faith entirely. And so, you know what? I'm done. I may still love God. I may still look for an experience with God, but clearly it's not here in the church. Clearly this doesn't work for me, and so might be a spiritual person, but not an institutional person. If that makes sense. The third possibility with that stage 4 is to keep moving forward, which is the desire. And that's really where spiritual direction, companioning, walking with others, allowing space, that's where that comes in, is that transition from 4, trying to get to 5, which in this book, they talk about a wall. There being a wall there. And, you can look at a wall as formidable, or you can look at it as an opportunity. And how you view it really is going to determine whether you move forward or backward, I guess. So you grapple with this wall, and it could be just one big question. It could be one thing that's challenging you in faith. And if you push through that, there's so much more beyond that wall. And if you crumple and you stop in that pursuit, well, who knows where you go from there, right? That's the first 4 stages. Thoughts?
I only have one thought that jumped out to me, and it's, I would say that stage 4, like when you're starting to question, like even if you jump out of the church, speaking from my own experience, that journey still continues. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
right.
The rabbit hole can continue outside of the church. It's just a shame that it doesn't continue within it, and
right.
I think it's a lot more difficult for it to continue outside the church, especially with that loss of community and the fear of like being truly vulnerable in community. It's like a very big loss for getting further down the journey. So yeah. I don't think it's viewed as viable to possibly pursue the journey of faith outside of the church. That's the view, the prevailing view, especially by those who are so fully vested as insiders. Well, you can't ask questions. You can't go someplace else. This is the place that you do that, and stop asking questions and just be happy about where you are, because that's what we've dished up for you. Right? That's kind of the prevailing sort of thing. But companioning and spiritual direction is, okay, let's just do this. You can do it outside of the church, but if you do it on your own, sometimes you can lose focus, or you can lose steam, or you can lose hope, honestly. So companion with someone, that spiritual director, to walk through and say, you know what, questions are fine. I don't know the answer to that question. Let's explore that. Let's move forward. Let's grapple with that. I think it's so healthy, and it's the permission has not been given for that, I think, in a lot of ways, and that's sad. That's sad for me. My heart is with those who are trying to move from 4 to 5. That's my heart. That's my hope. That's the whole purpose behind Make Space, which is my website and my future spiritual direction practice, is to help people move from 4 to 5. Because if you look at these 6 stages of faith, there will always be, as you move up in number of stages, there will always be fewer people at every stage. Like there's going to be people at stage 1, fewer people who are at discipleship stage 2, fewer people who are at stage 3, productive life. Like the number of people who are actually progressing decreases with every subsequent step, in my experience. And so, that's why churches throw budget money and all of their resources at stage 1, 2, and 3, because that's where the critical mass of people is, and you don't get that supposed return on investment with people who are asking questions and stepping outside of the ordered system. Yeah. Well, let's keep cruising. Let's do 5 and 6. I'm excited.
So assuming that somebody gets through the wall, and there's all kinds of images that float around with what does that look like with the wall? What does that look like to grapple with it? There's so many great movie images of, just that progressing and moving past this formidable object, this thing that you need to go crashing through, or scaling over top, or digging under, whatever it is. To just keep moving and keep moving toward that development of faith. When you bust through and you get to the stage 5, what you see is a shift from inward to outward. So stage 5 is where you really begin to process outward, where you might do some of the same things as stage 1, 2, and 3, but the purpose behind it is different. Everything in that stage 5 is about other people. It's about using resources for others, not for some sort of selfish gain. It's not about notoriety for yourself. It's about going outward and helping others. Because of how you are formed in faith, that is for others fully. And stage 6, like how many people actually get to stage 6 where everything is about a life of love. Everything is about completely other-centered and humility and all that fruit that Jesus talks about that is desirable within those who are followers of Jesus. Mother Teresa. The list is short. The list is short of those who actually get to stage 6. Stage 5, it happens with a lot of work, with a lot of intentionality, with a lot of really just kind of leaning into pain and allowing it to inform faith experience rather than dissuade. But 6 is hard. I don't know very many. I'm trying to think, in my life, I've known a couple stage 6 people. It's so rare.
I feel like Richard Rohr is a stage 6 person.
He's probably a stage 6. He probably is. I've been blessed to know a couple of people in my life who are probably, if they're not stage 6, they're moving that direction, and it's inspiring to see what that looks like. But yeah, it's not a lot, and unfortunately, in the church, you see, even in leadership, people who are not necessarily in those later stages. The interesting thing that they talk about in Critical Journey is that people, wherever they are in the stage of faith, have difficulty conceiving of a stage more than one beyond where they are. I think I'm saying that right? So somebody who's in stage 2 can see those who are at stage 3, but can't possibly conceive of stage 4. Like, it's not in their ability to really process that that's where they want to go. Imagery that might work would be, like a tour guide or a travel agent sort of circumstance where, like, they don't even know where they want to go. And so it really requires somebody who's been there. And, that's what spiritual direction really is, let me take you to a place that I know about. I got a friend who's a travel agent, and, hey, it's -7 in Findlay, Ohio right now, and I want to go someplace else. She's like, well, where do you want to go? You know what? I'm not sure. Tell me about some of the places that you're aware of, and she'll walk me through the process of, here are places that, this is beautiful. And I went to this place, and I've got a travel agent friend who's been this place, and their experience was amazing. She walks me through that and helps me to make the choices that I need to be able to, ultimately for her, book a trip, right? But I don't know where I want to go. She can help guide me in that. It's that sort of circumstance. Or for anybody who's ever done a college visit, my daughter's a junior. We're just about to get to the point where we're going to start going campus visits. And there's the student tour guide who knows all of the ins and outs, right? All of the details, all of the statistics, where everything is, to the point where they walk backwards to address and talk to you while you're walking forwards. And hey, there's Old Main, and on your left you're going to see, that sort of thing. They've been there and they know it. And that's the only way you're going to be able to find your way back to the administrative offices when the tour is done, because you're with them. That's the companioning of spiritual direction, moving from 4 through the wall to 5, and hopefully to 6. Obviously I've got to do the work to be able to experience God in such a way that I am moving towards 6. I will never be able to lead anybody in the direction that I've not already been, and that puts the pressure back on me as well.
Mm-hmm. Man, I love this model. Thank you for introducing me to it.
Absolutely. It's so good, and it makes, like I said earlier, it puts some words to things that I was like, I always knew that, I just didn't know how to say that.
Yeah.
So my heart is for that questioning crisis of faith, stage 4. Let's go. I'll spend all day with somebody who's really at that point and wanting to do the work, rather than just being complacent and sitting with what has always been.
So for me, I don't know where I would fall on these like stages, right? But I hear you talking about kind of elders and guides being able to like lead you into the next stage. Yeah. For me, it's been such a violent process, like in regards to that, because it's been this process. I don't know if this is human or my personality, but I have just always been a person like looking for an elder, and my family of origin, not having my dad around frequently when I was growing up. I'm sure that's part of it too. But I've always been looking for these elders, these sages to be like, okay, you're my guide. Like I'm in your hands. But it's these like little teases that drive me crazy, right? It's like I'll have these little interactions with men that are like the man I want to be, And then it's like so quickly, it's like they fail me, or, it's just like the veil gets dropped and it's like, oh, it's not, they aren't 100% what I thought they were, they're still just human crap, So I guess where I'm going with that is to say that I always get these little tastes of like elders and sages that I think can guide me. And then it's just like ripped away from me. It's like, oh, yeah. And what I've found like that's so beautiful through that process is very quickly that idea that there's somebody that I might be able to live up to, like their status where they're at, it's ripped away from me. And it kind of implants this idea in me that no, you can actually do what they do, or you can actually be who they are, and you can surpass that. You can become even, more loving and more, you know what I mean?
Right.
Does this make sense to you? So it's been so violent, but so encouraging. Because it's like, oh, they're just human too, and I'm just human too, and I could probably live up to that standard and like surpass it even. Like that's really exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, throughout, just as you've got people who are in stages of faith, you probably have guides who are also in various stages of faith.
Yeah.
Like it's with a baseball analogy, and you got base coaches, right? And you're looking to first base coach for your, you get signals, and you hit the ball in the outfield, and you're not looking for where the ball is. If you're a ball player, right, you're looking at the base coach. What do I do? Are they waving me through? Am I going to second? Are they holding me up? They're integral to your success right there. But at some point, first base coach doesn't help you if you're moving to second or third, right? Your eyes shift to third base coach, who has your best interest in mind, to be able to help you to the next phase, right? Are they waving you for a triple? Oh man, that's exciting. Your eyes are locked on them. If you take a peek for outfield, you're hosed, right? So it's that sort of a thing. At some point, the tour guide along the way, you surpass who that tour guide is, and you need to pass off to somebody else who is further along or can help you move further along. And it sounds like perhaps that's some of your experience of, somebody was there for perhaps a season, maybe it was a short season even. Was that enough to be able to spring you forward to what you need next, and you've just not found yet who you need next for whatever that next stage of faith is? You may need multiple companions along the way, and I don't think that there's any problem with that.
The way it's laid out, I feel like it's a very clear, like static model, but I feel like there's going to be a bit of dynamic to it too.
Oh, sure.
There's certain like parts of you that are going to progress through these different realizations, but you might be at stage 5 and there's still going to be like, parts of you that revert to stage 2 or that still like, are holding on to that.
Sure. So. Yeah. I don't, I'm trying to remember if it's in the book or if it was a conversation I had with some people about this book, but the imagery was right. So listeners can't see the picture of what it is. It's this wheel sort of image in the book that they use, and so it's just this round image of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 around a wheel. But this conversation I had, and maybe it's in the book, they talked about kind of you pinched in the middle of this graphic and you pulled upward, would this essentially materialize into a spiral in which you might cycle around multiple times, that you might be moving in a way that you go through the wall more than one time, that it's not, like you say, static, but oh, wow, then I just had another crisis of faith, and I realized I've got to unpack some more things from my bag. Seemed like it was going to help me on the journey, but nope, still not helpful, and I need to go through the wall another time on whatever this sort of thing is. So, yeah, I don't think it's necessarily clean cut, but we want to make it clean cut, don't we?
This is probably another way of looking at that spiral dynamics model.
Yeah.
You're familiar with that?
I think I know what you're referring to.
With the model with spiral dynamics, it's got like different colors that are associated with different.
Okay.
So, anyways, I have one more question for you regarding this model, and then a couple more things, and we'll button it up here. But at what stage would you say that people gain grace for the first three after they hit that wall? Because I think at stage 4. You're very frustrated with the first three, and it's like, why don't they get it?
Yeah, I think that probably grace and freedom comes in 4 if you're in a good place. Mm-hmm. I know someone that they're asking questions, they don't really care about the answers. Rather than I think they're excuse making. And, they're just looking for an out. Oh, this is unresolved and they can't possibly. But if somebody's leaning into those questions and exploring, I think there's actually freedom in finding that it's okay. You didn't implode the entire thing of 2,000 years of the church by asking the wrong question. And now suddenly everything is wrecked for everybody. That's not how it works. And I think that there can be freedom and there can be grace when you finally realize that, you get to that point. As an example, I've got a friend who posted a series of videos on Facebook, and just asking questions and trying to resolve some things. And it was just this person's way of going about that process, right? They were absolutely a stage 4, wouldn't have been able to call it that necessarily. And because Facebook is so unhealthy, people comment and they offer their 2 cents about everything, regardless of what you just posted, if it's a recipe or if it's one of the great questions of the world, somebody's got an opinion about it. And so people were starting to just chew on this person for expressing these questions and raising questions. And they're like, I think you're backsliding, and here's 17 scriptures that prove my side of the equation, and here's all of this stuff. You're going down the wrong road, right? So I pulled out this book and I found some just easy to understand descriptions of those stages, and I screenshotted and sent it to this person. I said, "Does this sound like you?" And they said, "Yes," and that was stage 4. And I said, "Let me just tell you that the people who are bagging on you on your Facebook page in the comment section are full-blown stage 3, and they don't know what to do with you. It's okay." The breath of freedom and the sigh of relief for this person was phenomenal, for them to realize, I'm not off the deep end. I'm not in this alone. I'm not the first person to be at this stage, and it's okay. And I don't need to take my instruction from somebody who is further behind in faith than what I am. So I think that's where the grace and where the freedom comes in, when you're in a healthy place and you're leaning into those questions.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is really interesting. So I mentioned in a previous conversation with you, Kent Dobson and his book Bitten by a Camel. And that's that's the first time I even heard of this process of spiritual direction, or this practice of spiritual direction. And I'm going to read you a little something from that. I'm probably going to open the episode up with this as well. But this just mirrors exactly what you said, and it's beautiful. So here it goes. When I first sat down with the spiritual director, I thought I might come unglued. I was in despair. I spilled my doubts and anger about the church, my parents, and Jerusalem. He had lived in Jerusalem for a little while, so he was just saw the war-tornness of it, and it was very dissonant for him. Anyways, the excerpt continues. I complained about being in the wrong denomination and the wrong religion. I told this lovely nun that I didn't feel like I was a Christian anymore. As tears flowed, she just smiled at me. And then she said, calm down. What you're going through is normal. You're okay. Everything in the spiritual life takes time and happens slowly. You're a good person, and you're lucky to have such diverse experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Awesome.
That's it. That's
Awesome.
it. My spiritual director is a nun. I love her dearly. Sister Wanda is amazing. She has that same posture. She just sits with me. It's incredibly freeing. She's an amazing woman, and I need her. And it's the same sort of story.
I'll read you one more quote off of that same page from that same book. And here it goes. The title of spiritual director is a bit misleading. They're more like deep listeners. They reflect back to you your own goodness and what they hear you saying. They listen with the ears of their hearts, so to speak. They help you draw out those hidden springs of real desire and longing. They create a safe space for the true self to come out of hiding. It's a holy and beautiful thing.
Yes, holy and beautiful.
Cool.
Out of curiosity, how does he spell holy?
I think it's the H. Let's see here.
Okay.
Yeah, H.
Okay, because it would be a holy, fully beautiful thing as well.
Yeah.
That holistic sort of, that whole person, beautiful sort of thing too. I was just curious how he spelled that.
Well, this has been a great conversation. And before we close up, I just want to ask you, I've seen on your Instagram that you've been writing a book.
I have been writing a bunch of stuff.
Okay.
I've been writing a bunch of stuff, and not full-length book. I've got a series of ebooks that I've been working on. My website is just about to go live. I've been having a couple of technical difficulties behind the scenes, so I'm starting with blogging, but there will be a resource page of a variety of ebooks that I have written that will be available for purchase and download. I do have a book in me, and I need to find time to really work on that. I do have a book for proposal also that I'm looking for a publishing source. It's a sabbatical journal, which is for those who are on sabbatical, and a guided writing prompt and journal process for kind of processing through the things, especially for clergy, that we don't often deal well with when we're in the trenches. But when we take sabbatical and we finally take that quiet to sit and just be who we are with God, that can be a scary time, and can kind of make it feel like we're not sure what to do because we're not doing the thing that we always do. So I've got that I'm looking to get published as well. So working on some projects here. I'm excited about that.
It sounds like you have no shortage of things that you're up to.
I'm up to some stuff. So yeah, so hopefully soon that my website will go live. It's makespace.life. Instead of .com, it's .life, which I was super excited to find that extension is now a new thing. It's about life and the full life lived, and so for people to be able to make space in life, that's what I'm about, and that's what I'm hoping to help people do. Makespace.life.
Beautiful. Well, we covered a lot of ground in that conversation, didn't we? Well, what a good one. I just love Trevor's heart into reimagining this role of pastor. The way he describes it makes me envision this archetype of a wise village elder rather than the crusader of absolute truth that often comes to mind when I hear this word pastor. And I think many of us are just starved for this type of presence that Trevor strives to embody. Someone that maybe won't directly tell you how to live, but that can invite you into a fuller life through this practice of listening in a deep and profound way and asking some good questions. So there are a few ways you can stay up to date with Trevor's work. Make sure to check out his website, makespace.life. You can follow him on Instagram at makespace.life. And he's also on Twitter under the handle at JCC Findlay. And links to those are available in the show notes of this episode. And before I close it out here, I've got a favor to ask you. If you've been digging the show, would you rate it on iTunes? That really helps reach more people. And if you hear an episode that resonates with you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who you think might enjoy it. And lastly, if you're on Facebook and Instagram, make sure to follow the show there for all the latest updates. The handle on both of those platforms is at @thegroundedpresence. And feel free to reach out by email too. I love hearing from you. And you can send those emails to thegroundedpresence@gmail.com. Well, that's all I have for you today. I will see you right back here in 2 weeks.